Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 401 Access Denied podcast. I'm the host of the show, Joe Carson, Chief Security Scientist and Advisory Associate at Delinea. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm always kind of enjoying fun topics and things that kind of get me excited and interesting. And I'm kind of welcome back with one of my favorite guests of the show. I think this is maybe a third or fourth time coming back in the episodes. Welcome to the show, Evil Mog. We want to give the audience a bit of a background, what you do, some fun things about yourself.
Yes, I'm Evil Mog. I'm an executive managing hacker over at X Force and senior technical staff member. My title changes, so it's kind of hard to keep up. I'm a quasi-retired member of Team Hatchcat. I say quasi because I had too busy at DEF CON to compete anymore. But for years, I used to go compete in the Crack 5010 competition. We've won a number of times. We're getting ourselves beaten recently by new up-and-comers, which is great. That means we have a good, healthy talent pipeline. But I specialize in authentication, security research, and passwords.
Fantastic. And I really enjoyed one of the things you made my DEF CON this year. I so enjoyed Jeopardy. It was so much better than it's been in recent years, and it was so much fun. So you definitely, and Malware Jake, you both kept yourselves running for quite a bit there. So it was actually very, very, very fun. So thank you for that.
Jeopardy is just such a long slog. It's great. Don't get me wrong. So those who don't know, I'm a long-running Hacker Jeopardy world champion. I've now won 2 black badges at DEF CON because of it. And in fact, I got my entire team black badge this year. So if you need a mercenary to go compete in your team, I tend to be open.
Yes, and you have convinced me. We will join forces in the near future for this. But it definitely was very entertaining, and definitely I was kind of always enjoyed getting to go and just it's so entertaining. It's so much fun. So thank you for what you contributed this year. It definitely was a good one. So on the episode today, we're really kind of focusing in, we've got Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we've got World Password Day, we've got all these things that focuses around passwords. And one of the biggest themes is really about creating strong passwords and also kind of focusing and trying to get people to use more around password managers. I want to give us a bit of give us some of the background. Where does passwords evolve from? Where did it start? Why did it start? And are they still
Well, I mean, when people think passwords, they think of something entering their keyboard. But realistically, all a password is a shared secret. You need to prove to a computer or a system that you are who you say you are. Passwords exist in everything from routers, switches, your phone to Windows Active Directory, Linux, Unix. And with passwords are stored in a very unique way, and it varies between systems, which means comparing password strengths, a password on, say, a Windows laptop, not to blame Microsoft because they know what they did, versus a modern day Unix system, a short 8-character password could be very weak on Windows, but extremely strong on a Unix system. When I say strong, I mean, all these lovely things called video cards, graphics processing units. These allow people to do an offline attack against passwords extremely fast or extremely slow, depending on how the password is stored. So computers don't store a password in plain text. Like when I say plain text, they don't store my password as password $1! They'll run it through a hashing algorithm and then a number of other methods to diffuse, confuse, and otherwise make it so it's not stored in that very same way. So verifying that password requires a lot of compute. For the average log on, that's totally fine. If it takes up to half a second, that's totally cool. But for a GPU, slows things down. So Windows uses a technology that, unfortunately was broken back in the 90s. MD4, UTF-16LE encoded, and that's really about it. Microsoft's overhauling this, by the way, and by Windows 2027, that's going to be a completely different story versus the other systems, it's not quite the same. Problem is the standards for what you can have for a password are really the same across the board, right? People change their password every 90 days from summer 1 to summer 2 or summer 2016 to summer 2017, or you get the idea.
Oh, they're simply using their kids or cat or dog's name with a year.
Exactly, right?
Something easy to remember. And your point as well is, one of the things that I think, we talked about many years ago, passwords used to be stored in clear text in a file. And of course, then they moved to the hashing techniques, which is that one directional hashing format. And with that, I think one of the things is that for me is, when we're creating passwords, humans are not the greatest. We're not the greatest at creating passwords. That's one of the fundamental flaws, is that we're sometimes left to make that choice. And over the years, I think, back when I was, getting really started my career, I only had a handful. So I could create something that was quite, complex, but quite easy, easy for me to remember. But today, the amount of credentials and passwords that I have to maintain is just so much.
I mean, what, you have 40 different accounts logged on. You get your pizza place, your airline reward points, your hotel reward points. And here's the problem. You log into your library. They don't have the money for an IT guy. So they could be storing your thing in a plain text password format. If you use the same password on, say, your Delinea laptop as an example, all of a sudden your library gets breached. Now your laptop gets breached because people share credentials on the dark web. It's turned into a big business.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things is for me is that, when I'm signing up for new accounts and so forth, and you're going in and says, it gives you the, you need to create a password of 8 characters that has, uppercase, lowercase, special characters and so forth. But what they're not telling you, to your point, is that how are they storing that password in the background? So should that's actually, become something that they should be making transparent, is that they are applying stronger algorithms into storing the password. It's not being stored in clear text. Because right now it's for many people creating a credential, it's almost like a black box. You don't know how it's stored in the back.
Well, even if they are telling you, there's no way you can verify, because they're not going to give you access to their source code. They're not going to go publish it, or if they do publish it, it's open source. Who's to say that haven't got it modified and there's a Trojan sitting in memory or right? I mean, here's the thing: there are 2 types of companies in this world. Those that have been breached and those that have been breached and don't know it yet.
Absolutely. So one of the things, getting to that, I guess, how do we better get at creating passwords? What is, what's your recommendation? What is a strong password? How would you master it? What's
Honestly,
the method?
The only password that's any good is one that I don't know, is long, random, and looks like line noise. Barring that, the password stored in my password manager. I mean, I know you folks do password management for enterprises. Big Blue goes out and hires one. Like they hire for every one of their employees, they buy one password. For an example, they buy like the family plan for us all, and then we keep it when we ever leave. But honestly, the only way of doing this is making sure everybody on the planet has a password manager of some type. But more importantly to that, though, backing up your recovery kit, your emergency encryption keys, your passwords to all those, and storing them in like 30 different locations. I've got one in my safe deposit box, one in family recipe book, one out on the farm. Like they're everywhere, because who knows when my house burns down, and if I lose my digital life and everything's tied to it, but then you're still tied with a secret though, right? Like you still need your secret to the password manager. So that one, honestly, sentences these days are really good with mild modification, random arbitrary words. Yeah, you're still gonna get around the whole humans are bad generating passwords, but if it's memorable to you and you can keep it for, a couple of years and change it every once in a while to make sure it works, that's good enough. 20 characters long, kind of a sentence. That's hard for a machine. Add in, guess what? It's 2024. You put spaces in your passwords now.
I love spaces in the passwords, and not just between the words, but actually in the middle of the word, which really,
you can actually do emojis now too. Like you can do the chicken face poo emoji, the cake, whatever else. Like those are totally okay, and they're Unicode strong. So yeah, use them, especially in Windows.
Absolutely, because for me, when I'm thinking of something that that will break my rules of my word list, because one of the things is I'm only as good as, when I'm cracking and trying to brute force passwords, I'm only as good as my word list and my rule sets and my masks. That's, of course, the GPU power that I've got behind it. But the word lists and understanding about the method that people create passwords, the moment they start doing something random, it just makes my computational process, it increases my cost to try and crack passwords. And that's one thing I don't want to have is a massive bill at the end of the month of just trying to, crack passwords that's impossible, or just my computational power would never be able to do it in the time before that user or person changes it.
That's the thing, like we're all shifting to using the cloud these days because no one can afford to get GPUs with this AI boom, right? I mean, good luck finding yourself some 4090s and everything else. Everyone's using for training. Now I'm going on to AWS, IBM Cloud, Microsoft, having to go buy these L40S GPUs, or God forbid you buy the H100s running for $95 an hour. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not made of money. And if I put like a chicken emoji, Japanese character for joy, German with the little whatever flunkies over it along with a French hat, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I'm sorry, I'm not typing that or put that in my rule list. It's just not going to work.
Even I love even when I'm based in Estonia, using the Estonian special characters, even just adding one of the random vowels that they have in just messes up all the rules, and it becomes very, very challenging for those who specialize in this. Governments and those who have the resources behind it. Of course, they're going to be able to find.
Yeah, we're going to get in.
Yes,
like
the ones which really
we haul out. Yeah, like how much GPUs do we haul it? Yeah.
So we're trying to stop just the easy basically cyber criminal or guying. That's definitely where we're able to make a difference there for sure. Is making it as difficult as possible for them.
So the Europol is going to get you. I mean, like for example, we hauled out something like 4 or 5 terahash per second of GPUs. Like it was just disgusting, and we still got trounced by a bunch of guys in their basement who figured things out faster than we did. So it's stuff like that that gets kind of rough. But here's the thing: passwords are evolving too. It's no longer just about a password. Right? There's things like passkeys that can be synchronized now between. We're abstracting away passwords themselves. And I think that's honestly a good thing. People cannot be relied upon to memorize passwords.
Absolutely. The more we move passwords away from the human decision making or creation, and we do it systematically, programmatically in the background, I think the safer the world we'll live in will be.
Exactly.
It really means that we're making it difficult when it's getting into programmatic in the background, and it's really about creating those temporary keys, additional factors of authentication, looking at different proximity or impossible travel scenarios and context-based security. That just increases the complexity for attackers, to really make it even affordable for them to be able to compromise.
And that's the thing. I love context-based security, and IBM's going this way as well. A lot of our products, which I'm not going to do product shill because this is a different podcast. But we're looking at things like you can't teleport. I can't log in from Estonia and then 5 minutes later from Calgary. We're looking at, am I logging in from a Mac and all of a sudden from a Windows device, changing from Chrome to Firefox to Brave, and then back again rapidly. There is am I logging in with my allowed time zones? Privileged user, should I be logging in from Estonian time while I'm normally Calgary based from 9 to 5? All these things are kind of adding up. And the major cloud providers, like the Googles of the world, are already checking these. Microsoft's bringing out things like conditional access. So in that regard, a lot of these new requirements to not change your password are making a lot of sense. The problem is you've got your traditional on-prem rules. Like NIST just released a bunch of new rules these days that stated, you no longer need a mix of characters, uppercase, lowercase, special, and you can no longer require a length more than 8, which, don't get me wrong, in an Azure joined Entra ID, I believe it's Entra ID. I think they changed the name in the last year. It used to be, Azure AD, but in that kind of an Entra ID Microsoft world where everything's tied to conditional access policies, that's totally perfect. But say your traditional on-prem, back in the Dino age, classified environment, you'd better be changing your password every time a domain admin leaves, the sysadmin leaves, everything, some of the path of privilege leaves, these kind of things, because again, we're using a password format that was created back in the 90s.
Absolutely. I think you're raising an important point there, is that yes, there's a lot of these new technologies coming up, but a lot of cases, even just like Microsoft have had to do, is they've had to basically support NTLM for the last 20 years because of backwards compatibility. Even though if you're using things like the Entra IDs and the Azure IDs, is that you're using a lot of the latest, but because of the backwards compatibility, because of the integrations and interoperability between older systems, they still had to leave those fundamental. I remember when they were changing a lot of the requirements for, I think it was the macro, and they disabled it by default, and then they had it enabled by default, and then they were talking about old exchanges and the standards. It's just because of that legacy, old systems, that we still have to deal with a lot of the older technology. It means that yes, I could go and apply some of those standards to my more modern technologies, but it's just not going to hold up in some of the legacy stuff that many organizations are still using.
And you ever get rid of the legacy, right? The legacy can be tied to a mainframe, some old CNC machine that's making millions of dollars. The problem is, like Windows specifically, and I hate to harp on Windows, but that's what the majority of the world uses. You could have a 128 character random password, and it doesn't matter, because if someone breaches your environment, password hashes are password equivalent. specifically the
Mhm.
NT hash in Windows. So that credential needs to cycle as long as the hash is known. No one cares about the password. Like this applies, for example, in NTLM version 1 reversion to NTLM using the DES
Mhm.
cracking method that people are using these days that makes a lot of splash. You need to, that's why domain admin or domain controller passwords need to cycle every 30 days automatically. I'm not going to get to the point where I can have privileged users cycle unless I have like an enterprise password manager like a Delinea or your 1Passwords or whatever is in your environment. You need those kind of systems to stay secure and traditional on-prem.
Absolutely, because it's able to make sure that all of those accounts, both legacy and new, have the same consistency applied to them. It has the ability to make sure that they're rotated. That even if an attacker does compromise a standard user in one place, is that they can't find ways to elevate to move around quite easily. It really forces them to I will say it forces them to repeat their techniques over and over again. And the more that they force them to do that, it creates that noise in the environment. When you start seeing noise, then it gives you, an early indication that something's happening. And that's what's
There's a
really
migration
important.
path, though, thankfully. Like Windows, for example, supports certificate-based sign-on. So you can do things like the Estonia Digital ID or PIN for sign-on with rotated back-end passwords. There are other methods that can basically abstract the password away. Like if I was a CISO tomorrow, I'd buy every one of my employees a cell phone or a cheap Android device or a cheap device of some type. I'd store the enterprise password manager on there. And I'd just say, look, your Windows passwords must be completely random. And you're going to type it from your password manager as opposed to one that you remember. And at least that solves the problem. It's just Microsoft's
And
moving away from
even getting to the point as well as we're moving towards more of the digital wallet scenarios, is I would even try to get them at least where some type of facial or biometric is also part of it as well.
like Windows
So
Hello.
it just Windows Hello, Face ID, and all of those things and biometrics. It's pretty much available in most modern, smartphones today. Is that and some laptops, that they're also and tablets and so forth. So just really getting where the user experience is basically, passwords are in the background. We are moving to that passkeys, which is that that can be unlocked at the edge device through biometrics, and I think that really the more we make the experience better. And that's what we're getting into as well, is that most of the consumer world is already kind of in that experience today. So to get that same experience in the enterprise, I think that will definitely have a fundamental shift and make it really difficult for attackers.
Well, it's all about friction removal, right? The thing is, businesses are set up so that they will route around damage. There's no company in the world that's in the business of being secure. They're in the business of making money. It's like an example. Most secure system in the world is encased in concrete at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, controlled by submarines. Is it useful? Probably not. So same deal. If someone can't sign into their laptop to go make a high frequency trade, they're going to figure a workaround fast, because if they lose millions of dollars waiting for that trade, or they can't run that CNC machine or the MRI machine, then what's the entire point? So we need to make it so that it's literally automatic. People sign in, or it's as easy as possible to do the right thing, because they're going to find the easiest path possible, which is why I love, build the best system in the world, put a user in front of it, watch them for a day or two during their business tasks. They're going to find all the holes for you. Why hire a QA team when they'll find it?
Absolutely. That's actually one of my fun things, is that, in the past, I've always kind of put myself in the situation where I always want to know what it's like to be in my customers or in the person I'm serving's, kind of shoes and kind of in their chair. And over the years, I've always I remember doing, it was pen tests, and years ago, I wanted to understand about, how can I help them do their job better? So, and sitting and just watching them for that period of time allows you to get some of the surprises, because they're really focused. How they get measured is very different from how I get measured. But ultimately, I need to make sure that they're being successful. So I need to always map my metrics and goals to the same as what, to help them achieve theirs. And I kind of fundamentally, I came up with a motto right after that, after sitting and watching many users either struggle or be successful with some things. And I will say that, anything that I put in place from a security perspective should always be better than the previous experience. And it should make their lives better. Not just about improving security and, reducing the risk for the organization, but it should make the actual employees' lives better. It's something they should want to use, rather than something that should actually be something that creates friction. The last thing we want is friction, because it pushes people down the path that you mentioned, is we'll find alternatives. So we'll find workarounds, whether it being just simply even just writing things down on sticky notes and put it on their table, which is, okay, if that is a locked room and a closed,
That's
protect
still
key,
better than having the same
it's still
password
better.
everywhere. Like my old dad, my dad had all his passes written in the family recipe book. We'll say,
Yeah.
hey, isn't that like insecure? Okay, if you want to break into the family farm with a senile old guy with a shotgun, like that shoots first, asks questions later, you are welcome to it.
That's what, because even a lot of my peers, and I see in social media sometimes, I see people, posting the password book online and saying, "Oh, this is shocking." And I'm going, to your point, if that's at home in a lock safe, it's better than using the same password everywhere. It's better than using something that is easy guessable and crackable. It's something that's physical that, if an attacker wanted to be able to gain access, they had to physically go and get it. And,
Yeah, and it's a good backup, right? I mean, here's the thing, computers die. I've got all my passwords printed out that I archive once a quarter just to be safe, and it's stored in like archive fireproof paper in a fireproof safe somewhere far away from my house, just in case, because I'd hate to lose my entire digital life because my phone died.
it always reminds me. I mean, sometimes people come to me and ask me for help, in dire scenarios, and I've helped, organizations, critical infrastructure recover from ransomware attacks and other types of incidents. The one I always remember was this. There was this kind of, small kind of family-run business that had been basically attacked with ransomware, and ultimately, when you get into it, their business and their digital, like personalized, were all of one. It was all merged together. Ultimately, one kind of, you're looking at the impact that their entire, digital life of their entire last 20 years had been basically erased by the ransomware. And when you're thinking about that, when I start thinking about it, it's not just about the business financials and their invoices and contracts and all of the things that they've had business-wise, but it was also their family photographs. And when that person was going through the details, they were telling me that, it's their family photos of, family members and videos of grandparents who had passed away many years ago. And they've no, record of that remaining. And you're getting into that scenario about, having a strong backup, having the ability to make sure you're protecting your digital life. And to your point, is a lot of that is the credentials that gives you access to that. I remember talking with a bank one time, and they said, you know what, when you have financial fraud, it's easy sometimes to get your money back. But when you have identity fraud or identity compromise, it is so difficult to get your identity back. And even, when people lose credentials or their accounts get taken over, the process that they have to go through just to recover that is more as difficult as
It'll
you can
take you
possibly think of.
years. Like it's impossible because you got to bootstrap your identity, you got to prove who you are.
Right.
You need to get a baseline. You got to be in support for, say, your Googles, your Microsofts. You got to give a blood sample and fingerprints, and show up with multiple notarized things, and use that to get other identities back. Meanwhile, trying to do these resets with 400 different companies, you'll just never get it all back.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the scary, I never forget that case. And it was one of those things that ultimately I helped the person kind of can negotiate and deal with the criminals. But it always kind of it made me fear, how can I stop, and reduce the risk of that happening to me? And, to your point is, doing all of these multiple things of resiliency, of, backups and alternative backups, not just of my data, but of my credentials as well, and making sure there's multiple paths into those. If ever at some point in time, like, a password doesn't work, what's the other way I can get access? Is it through a passkey or through a hard token? Is it through a recovery key? And really looking at the ones that's important for me, because sometimes your email is, a lot of cases, your recovery into a lot of those credentials as well.
Well, and here's the thing: how many people go look at, like, if people go buy a YubiKey, for example? Problem is those firmwares have breaks or compromises, or just eventually stop getting supported by Google, for example. So you got to go make sure your most recent, keys are up to date. Then go back up your backup keys, and we tried, say we're now nice and evolved with the authentication space, but realistically, multi-factor authentication is still a pain. It also goes back to, say, the end user experience, right? I'm prompting for every single logon for a hard token or a Google Authenticator, every single transaction, and I do 1,000+ transactions a day. Someone's going to rig up some kind of script or like a little rubber ducky that presses the button all the time just to go get around that. And that's no more secure than the way we used to be, right? People get authentication fatigue. I can probably tolerate 4 or 5 authentications a day before I get really, really annoyed, right? If I'm doing this 100 times a day, easy for an attacker to go slip in an authentication request. I mean, you go, oops, yeah, that was accepted.
Yeah. What I really like now is a lot of the services now provide you some type of magic link, or if you're already signed in on the phone, simply even a QR code to really simply just make it seamless does make that experience much better.
I love Nintendo for that, man. With the Nintendo Switch, where they just put a QR code up to go sign in. I sign in from the phone, go click on the eShop. Well, that's so much easier than trying to enter in your password. Like, especially it's like 20 characters long from a controller. It just doesn't work like it used to.
Absolutely. And I never forget, I remember having to do that on things like Spotify and Netflix and Disney and all of the other streaming services. You're just like, this is going to be possible to do it on the PlayStation
It's
or
why I
on the
never
Switch.
bought a new TV, right? Like, you get a new smart TV with all these sign-ons, and you have to move all your stuff signed over, and signing back into Netflix, and you buy a new gaming console. Like, such a pain.
Especially because the likes of me and you, we go with that. What's the maximum number of characters I can put in as the passwords, and to type that in is and go through and sometimes if you don't have that color coding into whether is that a number, is it uppercase, is it lowercase, what is that symbol?
Sometimes that character doesn't exist on the keyboard, right? And you can't sign in with that character on the keyboard. And you're like, well, I guess if we change the password in the back end, and you'll call support because it's not. No.
But yes, I love some of those services that really have made it much easier. If you're already signed in one device, the pairing of accounts, I really think that's a great way of, if I'm already authenticated very strongly on one device, make it easy for me to pair. So I can actually easily log into a desktop or laptop and so forth. So absolutely, the better we make the experience, the more people will want to use security. And then the more we make it difficult. What's some of the things, if you're looking for suspicious activity, indicators of compromise or, indicators of, accounts being, potentially being attacked, what's some of the things you look for? What would you look for?
My favorite is I'm sitting around, having a beer late night, and I get a notification on my phone going, someone tried to change your password, but it failed multi-factor authentication. Like, that's indicator number one. Number two is, say I'm signing into the site and it says, oh, you last signed on from Estonia. I'm like, well, as much as I like Iceman and Joseph there, I'm not, going to be coming to Estonia anytime soon. This is probably not me. Or I start seeing weird, suspicious things ordered. But realistically, that's the problem. You don't really know you're compromised as a consumer unless you're monitoring all these logs that you don't have access to, or until you see suspicious activity. So that's kind of the curse, is if you see weird things happening, people signing in, notifications, extra users on your Netflix, that's a big one where it's like, here's a random extra icon. And most people, how many people sign into all their accounts once a year to go look for activity? I mean, 400 plus accounts, good luck on that one, right?
It is difficult. I categorize my accounts into risk. So I've got, from my personal side, I've got my password manager, which I've got categorizations of risk. So the ones that the higher priority ones are the ones I will check for sure. And then there's the
like
ones
your
that,
banking, that kind of stuff.
Banking, email, some subscription stuff that might have sensitive information, your healthcare pieces in there. So you really kind of categorize it into what's important for me and what do I want to make sure that is difficult as possible. And then I've got medium risk ones, and then I've got low risk ones, which if anyone gets access, there's nothing really they can do with the data that's there. So I've got to categorize those risks. But then I spend time, on a periodic basis to go in and look at the logs, activity logs. And it is a bit frustrating because in a lot of scenarios is that, you're going to have lots and lots of failures. You're going to see lots of attempts, and it's indicating which ones are the ones that you should focus on.
It's when they succeed that I'm worried, right?
Yes, it's when they succeed, because that's the ones, especially if you've moved to, for example, multi-factor authentication where it's a push, simple notification log on. What I really like is definitely the matching of the numbers side of things, because that really, the randomness makes it more difficult to compromise. But you're looking through it. Sometimes I wake up in the morning, I'll see, multi-factor authentication, attempt failed because somebody's trying that push notification. You're just like, okay. And then you go in and you'll check the logs. One thing you have to be careful, and for the audience is for sure, is that sometimes even phishing campaigns are using, suspicious activity found in your account. You want to log in, and some phishing campaigns are really trying to take advantage of that as well, into making, you're suspicious that your account's compromised, but actually the suspicious activity email notification is the phish itself.
Yeah, so I need to ignore the emails, like log in. Like, this is what I wish every account would do, is give you a notification of logon within the platform as opposed to that email, because email can be spoofed heavily, but the actual logon, and I mean, unless somebody's compromised the site and said, yeah, at that point, what's the point? They've already got all your details, right?
Absolutely. So what's for the audience, what's some of your favorite go-to places to stay up to date? How do you stay educated? What are some of the places you go for, learning and to stay up to date with some of the new technology and changes?
Honestly, a lot of news sites. I spend a lot of time on the Register because, I like those guys. They do a fair bit. There's your traditional packet storms. Oddly enough, I still use Slashdot somehow. Now, this is terrible. I still use Twitter, and no, I refuse to call it X. I'll be deep in the cold ground before I call it X.
I do love your memes, though.
Oh, dude, I love my memes. There's a little bit of security content,
the last
but a lot
one was
of memes.
that rib sandwich. It's pretty awesome. It was a bit peckish when I saw that. It was like, okay, I would.
Yeah, I stole that from Discord, so that was actually pretty good. So those who don't know, I repost a lot of memes from Meta/Facebook onto Twitter. Some of them are rather entertaining. There's a little bit of security content on there. There's a lot of pictures about my cat, stuff like that. So if you want to get a good laugh, Evil_Mog is kind of entertaining on that regard. Promise there's no actual real content. Well, there might be some, but it shows up. But yeah, that's where I go to check out. Is a lot of Discord, a lot of X/Twitter, a lot of just randomly browsing the internet to look through the news, because oddly enough, weird things pop up in the news all the time. And then just word of mouth, and occasionally you have the odd NIST standard. If you want to go fall asleep at night, go read NIST. And
if you want to get your kids to bed really early, start reading them the
NIST, PCI, the various auditing compliance standards. I love compliance because it keeps people honest, but it creates a lot of work for most. And it's like, you need to be a lawyer to understand half of these specs sometimes.
There's a classic, I think there's a classic picture of me reading my book to my kids, and their kids are just, their faces just like, what are you doing to us? So definitely, good bedtime stories for any of those compliance and regulatory standards.
Yeah. And of course, podcasts like this are great. I used to think I was the only source, or news is the only source to stay up to date. Now somehow we're the experts. So yeah, listen to me, I think.
No, I think it absolutely. These are, for the audience, is always good. It helps them get that quick, stay up to date, informed about, some things they might want to learn more of, and then they'll go in and kind of look for other sources of information for sure. But Evil Mog, it's been awesome having you on. I always enjoy chatting with you, and definitely it's always great seeing you at various conferences throughout the year, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up again soon. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. And last piece of advice for everyone: use a passkey because they're great.
Absolutely. Passkey and a password manager. That's definitely the minimum standards for sure. So any final words of wisdom that you would like to show the audience? What way would it be best for them to contact you other than on Twitter?
LinkedIn also. So my LinkedIn username is Evil Mog. I'm easy to get a hold of on there. I actually trademarked Evil Mog as well in Canada somehow. So, but yeah, Evil Mog on LinkedIn. Track me down. I'm easy to get a hold of and approach.
Fantastic. Excellent. So thanks. It's been awesome having you on the show as always. It's always great catching up and chatting with you. And hopefully you get to see you soon. So for the audience, every 2 weeks, tune in for the 401 Access Denied podcast. We're always bringing ideas, thought leadership, new hot topics, and really things to really help make the world a safer place, not just for your organizations, but also for you and your family. Because everything we talk about here is not just about kind of keeping your organizations and business safe and you safe. It's about actually sharing that around with your family and the people you work with and the people you basically socialize with. So hopefully this is something that will help you stay safe and educated. So everyone, take care, stay safe. Until the next time. Thank you.